once sat by my husband's hospital bed and watched the line on the monitor flatten into a cold, unbroken stripe. I thought I knew what helplessness was, but that morning I discovered another kind of helplessness, one that squeezed my heart so tight it forced me to act, even as my legs trembled with age. In the fine drizzle of a small-town morning, I heard a faint sound. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through a crack in the wall, or maybe a kitten crying somewhere in the alley. But no, it was weaker than breath, more fragile than a falling leaf. A sound like a plea swallowed by the rush of life. I slowed my steps, eyes scanning the rain-darkened bricks of the sidewalk. And then I saw it. Beside the public bicycle rack, a rusted bike leaned crooked against the metal frame. Its rear wheel bent out of shape, and there, wedged tight between the frozen spokes, was a tiny creature, a Doberman puppy, barely a month old. Its body is as thin as bone, its black coat scarred with red patches of raw skin. Mange, I realized. A sickness born of neglect. Its eyes were wide and dark, blurred by tears. Its whole body shook under the cold rain, tiny legs thrashing in desperate futility. No one stopped. Passers-by hurried faster beneath their umbrellas. A young couple glanced over, shook their heads, and walked on, as if that fragile life was nothing more than an ugly stain, not worth the touch. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. Suddenly, the hospital room came rushing back, the frail hand of my husband clutching mine one last time, the helplessness of being unable to keep him here. And now, looking at the puppy caught in the wheel, I knew I would not allow history to repeat itself, even if this time it was only a voiceless, trembling animal. I bent down, knees pressing into the rain-soaked cement. My joints cracked, but I ignored the pain. The puppy's eyes locked on mine, a blend of fear and pleading. I could hear its faint heartbeat when I leaned closer, fast and frantic, a drum that could stop at any moment. I whispered, my voice unsteady but steady enough to reach him. "Don't be afraid, little one. You won't be alone today." I pulled off the old wool scarf I always carried, a habit I had kept since my husband passed. I laid it over the wheel, softening the steel edges that had bitten into the puppy's flesh. My hand slipped beneath the frame, trying to twist the spokes. My fingers were numb from the cold, scraping against the rusted metal. A spoke cut into my skin, blood mixing with rainwater, but I didn't pull away. The puppy whimpered, flashing its tiny milk teeth in a weak growl, a defense born not of anger but of habit. Pain had taught it to fear every hand. I drew in a breath, bracing the wheel. My voice cracked, but I held firm. "I know you're hurting, but I'm not here to scare you. Listen to me. I'm here to take you out of this hell." A sharp snap echoed as the spoke gave way. I twisted harder. The wheel shifted. The pup's tiny leg came free at last, dragging a streak of red behind it. It cried out, a sound so sharp it pierced me straight through. Then its body went limp, like a soaked rag slipping from my hands. I wrapped it quickly in the scarf, pressing it against my chest. Its breath fluttered against my collar, burning hot, as if it were offering me one final fragile plea. In the gray rain, while the world hurried past in indifference, I stood holding that small, trembling life in my arms, whispering as if swearing an oath. "Today, no one leaves you behind. Not ever again." I held the puppy tight against my chest, feeling its body tremble like a brittle branch in a storm. Its tiny legs were free of the wheel now, but the wound still bled, spreading red across my old wool scarf. I could hear its breathing, ragged, shallow, as if every inhale was a battle to cling to life. I looked around. People kept passing by, indifferent. A few glanced, then quickly turned away, as if this pain wasn't worth their concern. A young woman under an umbrella frowned at the sight of me holding a bloodied puppy, then quickened her pace. I wanted to call out, to shout, "It's dying! Can't you see?" But the words caught in my throat. I bent low, whispering into the puppy's ear. "Listen, little one. I know you're afraid. I've been afraid of losing everything, too. But I promise you, no one will hurt you anymore." The puppy whimpered, its tear-filled brown eyes flicking up at me for just a moment before closing. My heart lurched. I knew if I waited even a little longer, I might lose it right there, on the cold pavement. I dug into my pocket, pulling out a small bottle of water, thinking I could wash the blood away. But the moment it touched its skin, the puppy recoiled, crying out in agony. I stopped immediately. The only thing I could do was hold it close and keep it warm. I took off my coat and wrapped it tighter around the little body, letting the cold rain strike my shoulders instead. A bus roared past, brakes screeching, wind spraying rainwater into my face. The puppy flinched, panicked, thrashing weakly, its tiny teeth flashing in terror. It didn't want to bite, just a feeble growl, begging me for distance. I lowered my face to its trembling head, my voice slow and steady, letting my heartbeat reach it. "Shh. I'm here. I won't hurt you. Trust me." Its body stayed tense, but the trembling softened a little. I stroked along its narrow back, feeling each bone jut beneath the damp, raw patches of fur. Its hind legs dangled limp, strength gone. In that moment, a memory struck me. One night, years ago, when my husband was still alive. He had shivered in my arms too, coughing until he could barely breathe, yet still whispering, "Don't leave me." I had promised. But I had to watch him slip away anyway. And now I could not let myself break that promise again. I pulled a cardboard box from a corner of the wall, once used for old bottles. I laid my scarf across the bottom and gently placed the puppy inside. It panicked, scrambling to get out, tiny teeth bared once more. I held the flap steady, speaking firmly but softly. "You're not going anywhere far. You're going home." A young couple had stopped, watching. The boy asked hesitantly, "Do you need help, ma'am?" I nodded, breathless. "Son, just hold the lid for me." Gently, leave space so it can breathe. They did as I asked, their faces caught between fear and pity. When the box was closed with small breathing holes, the puppy cried out again, scratching weakly at the cardboard. Then, drained of strength, it lay still, wheezing faintly. I clutched the box to my chest and turned to thank the couple. The girl's eyes glistened as she whispered, "I'm sorry. I wasn't brave enough to do what you're doing." "Thank you," I nodded, unable to say more. The rain kept falling, the street still noisy and indifferent. But for me, the world had shrunk to the small box trembling in my arms. Every shake was a reminder. This fragile life was waiting for me to hold on. I walked faster than usual, cold wind whipping at my face. Inside me pulsed a rhythm that wasn't just mine. It was mine and his, beating together with every urgent step. I knew this was only the beginning. The real fight to save this little life was still ahead, but at least I hadn't turned away. And I whispered again, like a vow I could never take back, "From now on, you'll never be abandoned again. You have me." I clutched the cardboard box tightly as I hurried across the slick sidewalk. The box trembled faintly in my arms. Inside, the puppy panted, its breath flickering like a candle in the wind. I set the box down on the passenger seat of my old car, a silver Chevrolet that had carried me faithfully for nearly 20 years. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine coughed, groaned a few times, then finally caught. I glanced at the box and whispered, "Do you hear that? We're on our way to save you." The wipers scraped back and forth, smearing the windshield into streaks of blurred light. Rain slapped the road, pooling into mirrors that caught the faded glow of the street lamps. I gripped the wheel tighter, steadying the tires against the slippery pavement. Each time the car jolted over a pothole, the puppy whimpered. The fragile sound pierced straight into my heart. I bowed my head slightly, speaking low, knowing it couldn't understand my words but hoping my voice might reach it. "Please, don't leave me on the way. I still owe you a chance to live." The radio crackled to life, spilling out the familiar tune of "You Are My Sunshine." I began to sing softly, my voice trembling, not just to calm myself, but to fill the heavy silence inside the car. I thought of my husband, how he used to sing the same song to me after long days when I was too weary to smile. Tonight, I sang it for a fragile life fighting beside me. I dialed the number for the little veterinary clinic out by the river. When Marissa's voice came through the line, my own nearly broke. "Marissa, it's me, Evelyn. I found a puppy, a Doberman, maybe a month old. It was trapped, scratched up, and maybe even had a broken leg. Its skin is raw, bleeding with sores. I'm afraid it won't make it." "Calm yourself. Just bring it here. We'll be ready." The road stretched on, endless and winding, slick with rain. My headlights swept over soaked trees, their branches glistening in the downpour. My heart pounded faster, every second dragging like a minute. I kept my eyes moving between the road ahead and the little box at my side. Sometimes I leaned close to peek through the holes I had punched. In the dark, I caught the glimmer of its eyes, so tired, yet still clinging to a tiny thread of light. The 10 short miles I had driven hundreds of times suddenly felt like a journey without end. I whispered again and again, as though reciting a prayer, "Just a little longer. Hold on. I promise, if you can survive tonight, everything will change." At last, through the veil of rain, I saw the small sign, Riverside Veterinary Clinic. Relief swelled in me, only to falter when I noticed the red words beneath. Elevator out of service. I pulled into the lot, lifted the box in my arms, and braced against the wind. Rain lashed my face, blurring my vision. The stairs to the second floor were slick with water, every step rising like a mountain. I drew in a breath, hugged the box closer, and began to climb. By the 5th step, my knees cracked, breath short and ragged. Age had taught me pain, but tonight, each heartbeat pumped new strength into my limbs. I told myself, "Don't stop. It needs you." A young man in a raincoat came down, startled to see me stumbling. He reached out. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Let me carry that for you." "No. Just open the door for me." I have to hold myself." We reached the second floor. The glass doors of the clinic slid open, warm white light spilling into the storm like hope itself. I stepped inside and set the box on the counter, water dripping from my coat onto the floor. Marissa appeared, her white coat crisp, her eyes sharp and steady. No hesitation. "Take it straight to the emergency." "Evelyn, you did well. Now let us take over." I let go, though my gaze followed the box as the nurses carried it away. Emptiness rushed in, the same hollow ache I had felt when I released my husband's hand in the hospital years ago. But this time, I had not stood by helplessly. This time, I had fought to bring a small life this far. I stood there, chest heaving, heart hammering in my ribs, and I knew the real battle had only just begun. When the emergency room door closed, I stood frozen in the bright hallway, my hands clenched so tight the veins bulged green across my knuckles. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the air, pulling me back to long nights in the hospital, when I had stood the same way, waiting outside my husband's surgery. The monitor beeped faintly from behind the frosted glass. My heart seemed to fall in rhythm with every sound. I leaned against the wall, breath shallow, ears ringing. Marissa stepped out minutes later, her eyes behind the glasses betraying a trace of strain. "Evelyn, the situation is more complicated than I thought. The left leg is fractured, the ankle dislocated, and the skin badly infected. If we don't act quickly, the infection will spread. But anesthesia for a 1-month-old pup, it carries heavy risk." I gripped the damp wool scarf in my hands, the mingled scent of rain and blood rising from it. My voice shook, but my words were firm. "Do everything you can. Don't let it suffer anymore. I can't bear to lose another life right before my eyes." Marissa studied me, then nodded. "We'll try. But Evelyn, you must prepare yourself for every possibility." They placed the tiny body on the small operating table. It was so little, it barely covered a corner of the sheet. Nurse Tom slid in a needle, thin as a hair, into the vein of its front leg. The monitor pulsed with faint, steady beeps. The scent of anesthesia spread through the air. Its chest rose and fell quickly, shallowly, every breath looking like the last attempt to hold on. Marissa lowered her voice, issuing commands. "Increase oxygen slightly. Keep the heart rate steady. Begin resetting the joint." I bit my lip until it bled as the faint crack echoed from within. The little body jolted, then slumped. My instinct screamed to rush in, to hold it close, but the cold glass stood in my way. All I could do was press my hand against the pain and mouth words it couldn't hear. "You have to be strong, Hope. I've already given you a name. Hope. You can't leave me." Time stretched without end. I sat on a hard plastic chair, neon light casting a long shadow at my feet. Rain tapped at the window, its rhythm blending with the fragile beeps of the machine into a suffocating symphony. I closed my eyes, clutching the scarf tight against my chest, the only thing that still carried my husband's scent. And I prayed, something I hadn't done in years. "Dear God, if you can hear me, give this little one another chance. Don't let me watch her slip away the way I once watched the love of my life fade from this world." The door swung open. Marissa stepped out, pulling down her mask. Sweat dotted her forehead, but in her eyes was a softened light. She made it through. We didn't need pins, just reset the joint and wrap the splint. The greatest task now is fighting the skin infection and nourishing her. If she heals well, she'll walk normally as she grows. I broke. The sobs tore free in the empty hall. My hands shook as I pressed them over my mouth, but the tears streamed unchecked. In that moment, I could almost see my husband's smile somewhere above me, whispering, "You did it." I stepped inside. She lay beneath a thin blanket, white bandages wrapped around her back leg. Her eyes half closed, twitching now and then in sleep. I lowered myself beside the cage, gently touching a patch of dry fur. She startled, then slowly opened her eyes. Her brown gaze met mine. No longer the hopeless look from before, but a faint glimmer. A quiet admission. She had survived. I whispered, my voice hoarse from tears. "I'm here now, Hope. You're not alone anymore." When Hope survived the surgery, it felt as though a weight of 1,000 pounds had been lifted from me. But as I looked at her lying still in the recovery cage, white bandages wrapped around her leg, her brown eyes always clouded with a thin film of sorrow, I knew the real battle had only just begun. On the first day, Hope shrank back whenever a hand came near. The nurses applied medicine gently, cleaned her wounds, but she hissed softly, her body stiffening as if bracing for a blow. I stood outside, my heart aching as I realized. She didn't know that human hands could offer comfort. To her, hands only meant violence. So I sat down and rested my hand against the bars, not touching, just letting it be there. My voice was low, slow, steady, like a lullaby. You don't have to believe today, but one day you'll understand. Not every hand brings pain. On the third day, Doctor, Marissa asked me to try feeding Hope. I set a small bowl with a few soft morsels in front of her. She looked, then backed away, hesitant. I lifted one piece with my hand and held it out. Hope trembled, her eyes wary, her little body wound tight as a string. I didn't push her. I set the piece down on the floor and stepped back. She watched me for a long time, then lowered her head and ate. Small as it was, it felt like the first victory. I smiled quietly to myself. For a life that had been abandoned, every step forward, no matter how tiny, was a miracle. By the 5th day, I tried again, this time with more patience. I laid a piece of food in the palm of my hand, lowering it close, not moving at all. Hope looked, backed away, then inched forward, then back again. At last, she gave it a tentative lick. I held my breath, frozen. Then she took the piece into her mouth. Tears welled up and spilled from me, not because I had done something grand, but because this little creature had chosen to give me her very first act of trust. "Good girl, Hope," I whispered, my voice breaking. In the days that followed, Hope began to practice standing. The white splint around her left leg made every step awkward. I sat down on the floor, arms out like a makeshift ladder for her to lean on. The first time she tried, she shook all over, then toppled straight into my lap. She whimpered, eyes wide with panic. I held her, patting her back softly. "It's all right. If you fall, you stand again. I'm right here." We repeated the routine dozens of times. Sometimes she grew so tired she collapsed, eyes drifting shut. I stayed beside her, singing softly the old refrain, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." My voice was cracked and thin, but I believe she heard it, because each time I sang, her breathing seemed to calm. By the 10th day, Hope could stand a little longer. Her first wobbly steps, like a toddler finding balance, made all the nurses clap their hands. I couldn't hold back. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I laughed and cried at once, "One step at a time, Hope." "You did it." Her droopy ears twitched, and her tail moved faintly, the weakest of wags. I knew she was still afraid, still carrying scars of the past, but in that moment, she had chosen to move forward instead of retreating. At night, I often sat beside her cage, my hand resting on the bars so she would know I was there. On some nights, she crept closer, rested her small head against my hand, and closed her eyes. My heart ached in the sweetest way, because it had been so long since anyone had trusted me like that. My husband was gone, my children lived far away, and the house had been empty except for the ticking of clocks. But now, a fragile little life was filling that emptiness with nothing more than the sound of her breathing. I whispered then, a promise meant only for her. "From now on, you won't have to fight alone anymore. You have a home now, and you have me." That morning, golden sunlight broke through the heavy clouds, spilling across the small courtyard behind the clinic. The rain had stopped during the night, leaving the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves glistening with water. I carried Hope in my arms, her body still light as air but no longer cold as it had been that first day. Her breathing was weak but steady, and in those brown eyes I saw something new, a cautious, steady spark. Dr. Marissa walked beside me, holding a roll of bandages and a small bag of medicine. "This is the moment to try," she said, her eyes meeting mine as if passing me courage. Don't expect her to run. Just standing will already be a miracle. I set Hope down on the tiled ground. The white splint wrapped around her left leg made her stance awkward. She stood there, ears drooping, tail tucked tight, her little body trembling as if the ground beneath her were a dangerous cliff. I sat cross-legged right in front of her, arms open, my voice soft but steady. Come on, Hope. One step at a time. I'm here. She hesitated, eyes darting side to side, then slowly lifted her right paw. That first step trembled, her whole body tipping to one side. I held my breath. A soft thump echoed as she faltered, hip dropping onto the ground. Heat rose to my face, my heart sinking, but I refused to let despair take root. I clapped my hands gently, encouraging. Good girl, Hope. Try again. The nurses standing around watched in silence, eyes fixed on her tiny frame. Hope gathered herself, tried again, lifting her right paw, then letting the splinted leg brush the cool tiles. Sunlight lit her patchy fur, streaked with red scars. She shook, but this time she didn't fall. I felt as though the whole world held its breath with her. One step, then another, small, clumsy, slow, but true steps. Applause broke out behind me. One nurse whispered, "She's walking." I couldn't hold back. Tears streamed hot down my face, spilling into my smile. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Yes, baby girl. You're walking. You're alive." Hope wobbled toward me, then suddenly toppled right at my knees. She didn't growl, didn't resist. She only lifted her eyes to mine, as if to ask, "Did I do it right?" I stroked her head, whispering, "You did more than right. You conquered your own darkness." That day, we practiced dozens of times, falling, standing, falling again. When she grew too tired, panting hard, I cradled her in my arms, murmuring to her as if to lull her to sleep. But when I set her down once more, she still tried to take another step, as though inside her broken leg and fearful eyes, a small flame had never gone out. By the end of the session, Hope managed 3, even 4 steps in a row. We all clapped, eyes wet with tears. I heard one nurse whisper to another, "I've never seen a puppy with such a strong will." I smiled faintly, bent down, and whispered into Hope's ear, "They don't know, little one. This willpower isn't just yours. It comes from every time you were abandoned, every pain you endured, and still you survived to reach today." When the sunlight softened, I carried Hope back inside. She tucked her head against my chest, eyes half closed, mouth twitching as if in a small smile. I sat down with her, filled with a happiness I hadn't felt in so long. In the quiet of that room, I spoke softly, a promise to her and to myself. The day you walked was the day I found my reason to believe again that all suffering can be turned into a miracle. The day Dr. Marissa said I could take Hope home, I couldn't hold back my tears. The whole clinic seemed to brighten. Nurses gathered around her cage, smiling, clapping. They had all watched her journey, from despair to her first shaky steps. Now they looked like a family reluctant to let her go. I carried Hope in my arms, and the feeling was nothing like that first day. No longer a stiff, trembling body paralyzed by fear. Instead, a small life rested her head against my chest, her breathing steady, as if she believed my heartbeat was strong enough to protect her. At the door, Marissa touched my shoulder. "Evelyn, you saved her," she said warmly. I shook my head, my lips trembling. "No, doctor. She's the one who saved me. She gave me a reason to wake up each morning, to believe my heart could still love. We walked out to the parking lot. The evening sky burned orange and pink, sunlight streaking across the rain-wet maples. I set Hope into the little box lined with a soft blanket. This time, she didn't whimper or claw to escape. She just looked at me with wide brown eyes and wagged her tail. It was her silent agreement. She had chosen me as her home. On the drive back, I turned on the radio, an old country song filling the car. I didn't sing, just smiled, resting my hand lightly on the box. Every time the car jolted, I heard a faint scratch from inside, as if she were saying, "I'm still here." My wooden house sat at the end of a quiet street. For years it had echoed only with the ticking of clocks and the whistle of wind through the windows. That night I heard a new sound, the patter of tiny paws on the wooden floor, uneven but alive, echoing through the rooms. I set Hope down on the living room rug. She sniffed cautiously, ears drooping, tail still tucked tight. I sat on the floor, silent, waiting. After a few minutes, she walked slowly toward me and rested her small head in my lap. My throat tightened, my hand trembling as I stroked her. "Welcome home, Hope. This is where you'll never be abandoned again." Day by day, Hope grew used to her new rhythm of life. In the mornings, she lay at my feet while I read. At noon, I led her into the backyard, where sunlight spilled through the old maples, painting warm streaks across her back. Each step was still slow, still shaky, but no longer heavy with fear. Neighbors stopped by, astonished. "Is this really the dog you rescued the other day?" I only smiled, eyes wet. "Yes, this is Hope, the little girl who taught me what a miracle looks like." Some evenings, sitting alone in the kitchen, my eyes would drift to the empty chair where my husband once sat. The old loneliness threatened to rise, but then I'd hear Hope's paws racing toward me, feel her little head nudge against my leg. I cried, not from loss this time, but from the gift of a second chance. I looked into her eyes and whispered a vow. "That day, you were trapped in a bicycle wheel, and no one stopped. But now, you have a home. You've changed my life. And maybe the hearts of everyone who hears your story." I tell this not to claim I did something great. I tell it to remind us all, even the smallest life is worth saving. And sometimes, that life becomes the grace that saves our own souls. If you're hearing me now, please remember, no one in this world is not worth saving. I held Hope close, listening to her tiny heartbeat steady beneath the blanket. Memories rushed back, the helplessness at my husband's bedside, the empty years in that house, and the moment I found her trapped in cold steel spokes. Everything changed because I chose to stop, to kneel, to give one fragile life a chance. I thought I was the one saving Hope. But the truth is, Hope saved me. She gave me back the belief that love still exists, that miracles live in every breath. And now, I want to ask you, have you ever saved a dog's life? If you have, tell me, and tell the world, your story. Because when we share, these tears turn into strength, spreading to other hearts, so no dog will be left behind, forgotten, or trembling in loneliness. Let our stories become guiding lights, so that anyone who hears a faint cry in the rain will choose to stop and choose love.